Hi, thanks for tuning in. In this video, I'm going to be rebuilding my electric skateboard. It's gone over 1,000 miles. While I was riding, the rear axle decided to break. Here you see the motor liberated itself. The motor was dragging behind and just spinning. So this is how it looks. And got to get in there and fix it, see if it still works and such. Yep. In case you're wondering, those are speed stickers on the board, Spider-Man speed stickers. They do improve airflow, aerodynamics, and top speed. There's a closer look at the failure of the rear truck. Yeah, ground on the road there as I was going is pretty epic in a funny kind of way. So removing the battery, setting it aside. Here is a closer look at the motor. The polyurethane is starting to come off the edges, just wear, and then that really weird wear that happens on the inside. It's starting to cause some vibrations actually. Haven't been able to find a replacement part for that polyurethane tire, boot, rubber, whatever you call it. If you know where I can get that, please leave a link in the description down below. I have been finding a lot of the other ones, being unable to find the one for this particular motor. So getting the housing off the underside of the deck using a 5/16 open-ended box wrench and a Phillips screwdriver to get that done. Setting the washer and nuts aside, and then I started to remove the rear axle and then realized I got to take the wheel off first, loosen that, and then noticed a crack before continuing to proceed. Here's a close-up of the failure of the axle where it fractured, split, cracked. Yeah. So this is the replacement axle I'll be using from my second donor Swagboard, and I noticed that it has this crazy burr on it. Didn't want that because it's where the wires get routed, so I grabbed a die grinder and went at it. A lot smoother now. Grabbed a 3mm hex wrench and used that to remove the remains of the axle that were on the motor. Loosened that up and I left that there for now while I proceeded. I noticed that this screw was loose, stripped, so we'll have to fix that too. Removing all 8 Phillips machine screws, set them in the cover aside. Here, I'll zoom in for you. Yeah, the wires were all twisted up pretty crazy, so I disconnected the hall sensor connector, unraveled that a little bit, and removed the 3 bullet connectors for the motor leads, the blue, yellow, and green wires. And then I realized I wouldn't be able to get the remains of the axle off without cutting this jack off. So snippy snip snip snip, and then we can get the wires out through the hole. All right, zoom out. Here's a look at the OEM ESCs. I don't use either of them anymore. I had 4 failures in total, rebuilt it twice and said F that. It's an aftermarket ESC you see in there now. Look at this. This is foam powder from the battery pack. Just vibrates so much that it pulverizes the foam. I don't know, and it collects in that one little spot every time. Very interesting. So I disconnect the battery pack and set that aside. Do a little bit of housekeeping. Yeah, a little bit of housekeeping inside of the board. Once I clean that up, I proceed to removing the ESC, set that aside, and here are some, what are those, brass machine screws, slightly larger in diameter, 6NC32. What's that, 6/32 or something like that? Yeah, tappy tap tap tap. So we tap ourselves a new hole for that brass screw. Fits well. Someone asked what the dimensions of the inside of the housing are, so there it is for you. What's that? It looks like 73mm by 16.5. The battery pack looks like 72mm by, what's that, about 160mm. And getting back to reassembly, fishing the wires through the new axle that we had to fix up, no worries there, and using the 3mm Allen wrench, we get that on there secure, and reaffixing the rear wheel. I notice it's too tight, so gotta back it off. You don't want your nuts in a bind. See, the wheel spins a lot longer, a lot looser, much better ride, better time. Yeah, don't over tighten your nuts. What's next? Oh yes, this is a I almost said Wallace. It's a grommet. No Wallace needed. Using it as a weather seal and to keep the wires from chafing against the metal housing. I inspected the battery pack there before putting it back in and set it aside, getting the axle on now. Pretty much the reverse of everything you see me do. Tighten that on. This time I'm using a socket wrench and a Phillips screwdriver. Get the housing back in. Oh yes, back to this connector. Fun times. Got to remove all the pins that are in there. And then I borrowed some donor pins from some JST connectors I have and grabbed my grapple grommet connector, stripped the wires for the hall sensor leads coming off of the motor, twist them together just so that they don't fray as I try to stick them into the crimpy crimp tool. Yeah, there we go. Crimp. Get all those grapple grommets on there and then stick them into the Weeble Wobble connector one at a time. And then you got to squish it in there. Yeah, bring the housing back in, and you see how well the wire sits in that grommet. It's perfect. And then I can reconnect my motor leads, blue, green, yellow, just like that, onto the hall sensor connector. We get that hooked up. Then next we can connect the battery pack and give everything a test. Awesome. Looks like it's all still working. So I grab my Phillips screwdriver and I torque the 4 Phillips nuts down on the ESC since they were loose. Attach the cover for the housing, and the new brass machine screw sits very well, nice and flush. Everything looks good, so we can attach that back to the bottom of the deck of our electric skateboard using the 5/16 locking nuts and Phillips screwdrivers. Don't forget the washers that we had all removed before. I get them all on there finger tight. Here I'm just inspecting my straps. The webbing looks like it's actually started to weld together from the vibrations, but nothing was fraying too bad, so I proceed to putting the battery in. And this is just the wiring harness. It makes it easier to connect the battery to the board. So do these straps. 1 is enough to hold the battery on, but 2 keeps it nice and secure. It's loose there because I haven't tightened the nuts down yet. And I gave it a quick final test before securing everything, and it worked. And I remember my rear truck is loose, so I tried to tighten this nut down, but I don't know, the lock washer on it decided to do just that lock. It wasn't tightening down, so I grabbed the broken part, looked at it, and realized it's just spinning on the bottom. There's nothing to hold it. And then I got back to securing the housing to the deck using a 5/16 socket wrench and a Phillips screwdriver. Charge the board up and we're good to go. Thanks for watching. If you learned something, consider sharing this video and subscribing.